in the air. For this couple was believed to be having an inappropriate relationship. Not confirmed, but suspected. Gossip flew around the community like butterflies, gathering the evil poison and spreading it from house to house as a delicious delicacy. And my grandfather had taken part in the potion. And as he stood to pray, he openly shamed this couple in front of the whole congregation. I was so embarrassed. I was just a little girl. And even as a child, I could feel the horror of what was happening and recoiled from the disgrace. You know, the incident may have quietly slipped by me as a child if it wasn't for the fact that my aunt, who recently had been raped at one of our universities, was sleeping in my bedroom. Her weeping awakened compassion in me at a profound level. Why was she being treated without mercy? Why was her unwanted pregnancy embarrassing to her family, to the very people who raised her? Why were there not loving arms around her to surround her with love and compassion? What had she done that was so shameful that she was undeserving of the most basic of kindnesses? Rejected and condemned because someone else's sin against her. And these were the words: if you just had, they pierced her heart. Exiled into isolation, she was considered a disgrace to the family and their impeccable reputation. In those moments, I rejected all that my parents and my grandparents stood for. Their religiosity seemed repulsive to me. I can remember thinking, I don't like your God. It propelled me on a search for who is this God really? Is he like my grandfather? Spiritual abuse grows out of self-righteousness or spiritual pride. It is the most insidious and destructive type of abuse. The fact that it is done under the authority of God or religion makes it most diabolical, dark, and destructive. It is Satan's most effective weapon to destroy connection between God and his children. Do you know the definition of insidious? It's sneaky. It's cunning, it's crafty, it's wily, it's under the radar, it's tricky, it's underhanded. It disguises itself under some other banner in order to mask its true character. It hides, and it's systemic. It is enculturated to the extent that we perceive it as normal. It's just the way things are. To understand this and how pervasive has deep effects on your life and effectiveness of your ministry. It's very serious. It has life and death consequences on every level. So, something that I want to talk about today is this abuse. Abuse is sin. Would you not agree?
Amen.
No matter where on the continuum abuse falls, it's sin. I must make another statement. All sin is abuse. Okay? If my assertion is true, and we believe the scripture that all have sinned, then that means all of us are abusers. Society wouldn't classify us as that. It's only when we can put it in the legal system that we say that it is abuse, that we tend to label it as abuse. But I want to submit to you today that all sin lies on the trajectory of abuse. So first, a definition. Abuse is any action, behavior, or attitude which diminishes a person. It is any action, behavior, or attitude which robs an individual of their God-given personhood. It is any action which denies a person of their ability to design their own destiny or make an independent choice. It is any attitude which sees them less than the treasured son of God, son or daughter of God that they are. Broader still, it is any action, behavior, or attitude that portrays God to any individual as someone other than a God of love, mercy, forgiveness, and grace. It is any action, behavior, or attitude that leads a person to doubt or distrust God. Any action, behavior, or attitude that portrays God as arbitrary, demanding, oppressive, or difficult to please. One only has to look at the sins listed in the Bible and ask the question, which one of these is not a violation of yourself or a violation of another person? If we choose a God other than the supreme God, we will be devoid of love and thus become abusive in consequence. If we worship and admire a false picture of God, then we will become abusive, since all false portrayals of God limit and define His love, redefine. If we misrepresent God, we will, no doubt, do damage to other people's reputation. If we kill, commit adultery, and steal, we are abusing others by our unfaithfulness and disregard for life and property. In Revelation, we have the juxtaposition of two characters, the Lamb and the dragon.
That's right.
The Lamb, the most gentle, non-violent creature of all God's creation, is seen as the victim of the dragon's abuse. The dragon is described as an angry beast that terrorizes both heaven and earth. Thrown out of heaven, he uses his strong and vicious tail to snag a third of the angels and fling them to the earth. Furious and red-faced, he stands before the splayed legs of the woman to snatch away her baby as soon as it is born. But for divine intervention, he would have destroyed the child then. Foiled in his intent, he does everything he can to ruin the life of the woman and any of her children, and leaves the lamb bruised, bleeding, and dying. How did the dragon become the dragon? To answer that question, we must look to the king of Tyre and the king of Babylon in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. These figures play a symbolic role beyond that of earthly kings. Both of them are described as heavenly created beings that have fallen. Both have supernatural features that have led Old Testament scholars to believe that they are mythological figures that represent a heavenly realm. So I want to go through the process by which Satan became the devil. Lucifer became the devil. So can we have the slides? They're already. Okay, the first is pride. And I'm using passages of scriptures from Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. I haven't referenced every single one. I invite you to go back to these primary passages and study them. So, pride. Your heart became proud as account of your beauty, Scripture says. The first step Lucifer took on the trajectory of abuse is pride. Pride is the misvalue of a person. Pride is not only thinking more highly of yourself, but is also thinking less than yourself. Low self-esteem is just as much pride as the more arrogant form. Pride is about making your self-worth connected with your beauty, your earnings, your degree, your social status, titles, anything that makes you feel superior to someone else. The American way is prideful, isn't it? How fancy a car do you drive? What clothes do you wear? All establishes whether or not you have status. This leads us to say he's richer, he's poorer. She's more beautiful, she's ugly. She's smarter, he's not so smart. So on the basis of how we value ourselves is the basis of pride. It is the very foundation of the trajectory of abuse. The next is externalism. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. Luther began to evaluate things based on an external thing, his beauty. And God said that corrupted his wisdom. External is what is on the outside, the beauty or the lack thereof, the wealth or lack thereof. It becomes your locus of control. It's not from inside of who God made you, but it is external. The externals become more important than the character of how you live and act in an everyday world. The rich young ruler was governed by externals. You know, he was drawn to Christ for some profound reason. Because of the context in which that story is told, I think that he was fascinated by how Jesus treated children. And it drew him in. And he says, you know, what can I be saved? But when Jesus touched the external thing that gave him clout in the community, he walked away. It was too much to give up the external thing. The fact that Lucifer saw himself as superior, he was more beautiful and beautifully adorned than all the heavenly beings. He stood next to the very throne of God, and that led him to the next level of abuse, and that is control. I will preside on the mount of the assembly in the remote places of the north. His self-perceived superiority led him to believe that he was more capable of running heaven than God. He moved to a desire to exercise authority over, to control other human beings, other heavenly beings. This is the core of abuse. It assumes that people do not have the ability to control themselves and must have external restraint in order to function appropriately. when you attempt to control someone by passive aggression, by manipulation, deceit, or sheer force of the will, you have assumed a false divine state. And we assume that we know better than they how to run their lives. And let me say, we are so used to living in an abusive culture that we're used to giving up our freedoms and being controlled by others or external factors. And we have a hard time sorting out when another is attempting to control us. Only as we change gods ourselves are we able to fully understand the non-controlling nature of true God and then be able to recognize abuse in its most fundamental form. Closely related to control are the next two steps on the trajectory of abuse. Next is supremacy. I will lift up my throne above the stars of God. The cycle of abuse is from pride to violence, and it rapidly descends from a desire to be better than to a lust to be the best. The lust for supremacy leads into ever-deepening levels of control. To be the best, we have to manipulate the system, bargain, gossip, make political moves, outmaneuver, impede the progress of someone else to the point that they want to leave. In a lecture at Stetson University that I attended in my master's program in 1990, I had the privilege of listening to Rabbi Friedman. I don't know if you are familiar with him, but he writes the book Generation to Generation, some great literature. But he opened the lecture with these words: the most manipulative, passive-aggressive, recalcitrant, controlling, dysfunctional people rise to the top. What does that say about us? The most manipulative, passive-aggressive, recalcitrant, controlling, dysfunctional people rise to the top. Why is that? Because those who lack self-control or internal control tend to assume authority over other people and their environment. They have a need to control the exterior because the interior is falling apart. Those who seek supremacy go to the next level, and that is power. I will ascend above the clouds. Who is equal to the beast, and who can make war against him? That is Satan's mantra,
That's right.
The beast of Revelation is a very ferocious creature, extremely opposite from the Lamb. The idea is the beast is so powerful that nobody can conquer it. Nobody can make war against him and win. Because people resist being controlled, abusers must assume oppressive authority to maintain their position. But they can't long stay in control without the next step. Misrepresentation. And the great dragon, the ancient serpent, was thrown down. He who is called the devil, or the Satan, the deceiver of the whole inhabited world. I once worked for someone who attempted to control by misrepresentation. Before his arrival on our team, it was one of the healthiest places I have ever worked. There was a real, genuine spiritual community there. But he was used to a hierarchical system rather than a team approach to leadership and ministry. And so we tried to invite him into the community that we had, where there was mutual accountability and spiritual health. But he was so threatened by that. So the first thing he did was select 2 or 3 people to become part of his inner circle. And he talked about plans he wanted for the department in that little circle. But it wasn't communicated to anyone else. And then he placed these individuals over us in different ways, where before we had just kind of been all on the same level, sharing together. So that was the first thing he did. So he brings in this inner circle. The next thing he does is he starts saying things about different people here and there. So-and-so does this, so-and-so does this. Creating mistrust and misrepresenting who we were. So within a short while, the whole team has fallen apart. We're not talking to each other anymore. And there was 12 of us. We're not talking to each other anymore. And because we don't know who's on whose side. A place that was openness and caring and loving support, we now don't know where anybody stands. And it suddenly dawned on our dull senses. I remember the day this happened. What was happening? And we said to each other, can't do this anymore. We got to start talking to each other.
Yeah.
We were a team. Let's continue being a team. So the next thing he did was fire one based on a minor infraction. And he kept increasing pressure and doing things to divide us until all of the original team had been fired. He needed to control and have supremacy. And it led him to misrepresentation and finally to temporary financial and emotional devastation to 5 families at the time. Without active communication, honest communication, with limited or inaccurate communication, people have limited choices. And true freedom is inhibited. The results to those who accept the abuser's lies involves one of the mechanisms by which they become victims. Deprived of the truth, they make wrong choices that injure themselves and others. Abusers hold their victims fast in a web of deceit, and once their victims accept their falsehoods about themselves, reality, and God, they can no longer see the way out of the web. They become trapped, inert, and incapable of breaking. The ultimate end to the trajectory of abuse is violence. In the abundance of wares trade, your internal nature became filled with violence. If all else fails, an abuser resorts to violence. Lucifer could not, through temptation, deceit, manipulation, intimidation, or threat of death, move Christ to bow to his assumed supremacy. Rage grew in him like a fire in a whirlwind, and he killed the Son of God. All heaven was horrified at the result. And they never let him in the gates of heaven again.
Right.
His true nature was demonstrated. The cycle is complete, almost. The next one is imaging. I will resemble the Most High. I believe this is his most masterful deception, is that he comes off as an angel of light so that he can abuse at a profound level. And we'll talk about that, some more. Recently, it was a PBS special on the survivors from the Waco crisis. And all of them are older adults, now. But they're telling their story how their mothers would take their hands and walk them down the hall to David Koresh's room to sleep with him at night. And they believed that that was God's will. He had so twisted their thinking that mothers, mind you, mothers, were willing to walk their little girls, 10, 11, 12-year-old girls, down for him to sexually violate. How distorted can it get? A milder form of imaging that takes place, and one with which we are more familiar, is expressed in the words of one of my friends. He has always been a prophetic and courageous voice in the midst of institutionalized religious practices. He's been in leadership in one of our institutions for 9 years, and this is what he says. I think it's harder to buck the system when in a place of influence. That's us. Because one knows that the system holds you only tentatively.
That's right.
In a moment, you can be gone. And then no voice at all.
Yeah.
And of course, no income either. Also, in the place of influence, you have been influenced. The system, even if subtly, is in you. You are not just in it. Or maybe for most, a mellowing occurs after years of trying to make changes while staying alive. And mellowing and yellowing may look a lot alike. So, abusers become victims. Supremacy beats people into submission. Power over someone creates a sense of powerlessness, helplessness, and even hopelessness. Misrepresentation, deception, and when people believe a lie, they will act according to the lie. And violence creates victimization. Imaging and sacralizing, and that may be a word I invented, abuse creates conformity. Independent thought and action are seen as heresy. So we've been in this heavy stuff. I want you to see the other side. Let's look at the kingdom of God. And this is based on Philippians 2. And then we'll get into a story. But we'll just quickly look at how different God's kingdom is versus Satan's kingdom. It's just so profound and lovely and beautiful. So, Christ's kingdom is the opposite of pride. It is based on humility. Being found in the appearance of a man, he humbled himself, taking the very nature of a servant. Are we keeping up with this? Okay, so then internalization, not externalization, but internalization. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. There are what a man, let me get my tongue tied. They are what make a man unclean, but eating with washed hands does not make him unclean. It's internal with Jesus. Freedom of choice. If any man will, let him come. And truth-telling, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the rooftops. And then it's nonviolent. If any kingdom was of this world, then would my disciples fight to prevent my arrest. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. And totally unassuming, who being in the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. The Bible has given us one of the most developed, chilling character studies on what it's like to be under the rule of the kingdom of Satan. And I want you to look at that with me. Esther, a rare book that we look at, or if we do, we focus on Esther and her nobility, or Mordecai and his courage. But I want us to look at Haman. Esther chapter 3. Sometime later, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire, essentially prime minister. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by, for this king had commanded, but Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. Then the palace officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the Lord's command?" They spoke to him day after day, but still he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this to see if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. And go over to chapter 6, verse 1. That night, the king had trouble sleeping, so he ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign so it could be read to him. In those records, he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bigthana and Teresaah, two of the eunuchs who guarded the door to the king's private quarters. They had plotted to assassinate King Xerxes. What reward or recognition did we ever give Mordecai for this? The king asked. His attendants replied, "Nothing has been done for him." "Who is in the outer court?" the king inquired. As it happened, Haman had just arrived in the outer court of the palace to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole he had prepared. So the attendants replied to the king, "Haman is out of the court. Bring him in." So Haman came in, and the king said, "What should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me?" Now note the next part of the text. Haman thought to himself, "Whom would the king wish to honor more than me?" So we replied, "If the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with a royal its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see that the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robes and led through the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go, "This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor." "Excellent," said the king to Haman. "Quick, take the robes and my horse and do just as you have said for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the gate of the palace. Leave out nothing you have suggested." So Haman took the robes and put them on Mordecai, placed them on the king's own horse, and led him through the city square, shouting, "This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor." Afterwards, Mordecai returned to the palace gate, but Haman hurried home, dejected and completely humiliated. Xerxes' kingdom is huge. It goes all the way from India to Ethiopia. There's 127 provinces in his kingdom. His kingdom is very, very wealthy, in large part because of the Jewish communities that are living in those provinces. They are a group of people, while separate and distinct, they're very loyal to the king. And Mordecai is an example of loyalty, serving at the gates of the palace every day. And he's doing it as a volunteer. He's not an official of the government. His presence there as a volunteer uncovered a secret plot to kill the king. Haman, who is a descendant of King Agar. If you want to study that story, that's in the Ammonite king Saul saved in disobedience to God's direct order. He's been appointed as the prime minister. And, he must have been a particularly obnoxious individual. Because notice what the text says there in chapter 3. It says, all the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by. Now that's normal in a traditional culture. People just bow down to people that are older and people who are dignitaries, people that you respect. You just do it. I love watching foreign movies, and some of my favorites are Korean or Asian movies. I'm just kind of like shocked at how often people just bow, or even a nod of the head when, in someone else's presence. They're so kind and so respectful. So this isn't unusual. But look at the second half of the verse. For so the king had commanded. They're not doing it because they want to, you see. They're doing it because he is commanded. For some reason, he was not particularly loved. The king had to command that the court officials pay him due respect. One man, one courageous man, refuses to bow down or respect him. And we don't know why he didn't do that, whether it's because he disrespected him or whether it was his allegiance to God, but he refused to bow down and to this wicked man. So, but it's also very interesting. Haman doesn't even realize that Mordecai is not bowing down to him. He's so self-absorbed, he doesn't see this man that he passes by every day as he goes in and out of court is not bowing down. Okay, it's two of the officers who informed Haman that Mordecai isn't bowing down. But once he notices it, knows about it, it becomes an irritation to Haman. And that's going to just backtrack a little bit in the story. Go to chapter 5. This is incredibly interesting. Verse 9. This is right after the first feast that Haman has been invited to Esther's banquet. And Haman was a happy man as he left the banquet. Why do you think he was happy? He was privileged. He was brought into the presence of the queen. But when he saw Mordecai sitting at the palace gate, not standing up or trembling nervously before him, Haman became furious. However, he restrained himself and went on home. Then Haman gathered together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, and boasted to them about his great wealth, his many children. He bragged about the honors the king had given him and how he had been promoted over all the other nobles and officials. Then Haman added, and that's not all. Queen Esther invited only me and the king himself to the banquet she prepared for us. And she has invited me to dine with her and the king again tomorrow. Most telling verse next. Then he added, but this is all worth nothing as long as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting there at the palace gate. Wow. So Haman's wife, Zeresh, and all his friends suggested, set up a sharpened pole that stands 75 feet tall. And in the morning, ask the king to impale Mordecai on it. When this is done, you can go on your merry way to the banquet with the king. This pleased Haman, and he ordered the pole set up. What do we have going on here? He's got everything. A large supportive family, power, honor, prestige, authority, wealth, but all of this is worth nothing. One person doesn't give him honor, and every other good and precious gift becomes worthless. Wow. C.S. Lewis says in his famous chapter on pride in Mere Christianity, pride gets no pleasure about having something, but only having more of it than the next person. You may think you're proud about being successful or good looking, but you're not. Because when you are surrounded by other people with as much or more success, wealth, or looks, you lose all pleasure in them. That's why Haman doesn't get any pleasure in his accomplishment. He doesn't care about the position. He doesn't care what he's doing. He's not really invested in this. What he wants is respect. And he wants people to approve of him above everyone else. We saw that in Lucifer. He had everything. He was the most beautiful of all God's created beings. He had the highest honor next to Jesus, and yet he wasn't satisfied. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. Patriarchs and Prophets has this profound statement. Though all his glory was from God, this mighty angel came to regard it as pertaining to himself. Not content with his position, though honored above the heavenly host, he ventured to covet homage due only to the Creator. Instead of seeking to make God supreme in service and loyalty himself, coveting the glory with which the infinite Father had invested his Son, This prince of angels aspired to power that was the prerogative of Christ. Pride is the endless ego calculation. You're always adding things up. You're always seeking the thanks you think you deserve. Am I appreciated here? How am I being regarded? How does this make me look? Always saying, what about me? It is also seeing yourself as more deserving, more knowledgeable, more capable, wiser than anybody else. I love what Pastor Tim Keller says. Pride is what makes you evil. Pride is not one sin among many, it is the root of all of them. Pride is the hellish petri dish that grows all kinds of corruption in your life. C.S. Lewis puts it this way: pride is the mother hen under which all other sins are hatched. The essential vice, the ultimate evil, is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all that are mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil, and pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state. That's a profound statement, isn't it? And yet we in the church deal with pride very lightly. Is this not true? We deal with it very lightly. But it's very bad. It's very bad. You know, we'll deal with adultery. We'll deal with lying. But we never speak to the issue of pride. But the Bible talks about it everywhere. Pride goes before a fall. Pride leads to devastation. Pride leads to violence. It's deadly. All pride is deadly. Chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. We'll go back to that verse really quickly there. Haman, when he heard about this, was enraged. When he heard about the fact that Mordecai would not bow down, he was enraged. He wasn't satisfied by publicly humiliating Mordecai and therefore making him bow. He was intent on removing the irritation and all of his people. So he says to Xerxes, give me permission to destroy this people and take away their wealth. And this is how much I will bring into the king's treasure. And Xerxes at this point has just won a major campaign in Greece. And he has spent bukus of money. And on top of it, in celebration of this great victory, he goes on to have a 180-day party throughout the whole kingdom. I mean, 180 days. You know how long that is? 180 days. He has spent bukus of money. And the scripture says, he said they could drink as much as they wanted. They could have whatever they wanted. So he has totally depleted his treasury for this grand party in celebration of his victory. So how is it, did Xerxes buy into this evil scheme of Haman? He uses the next tactics that all abusers use. He misrepresents the truth. He doesn't remind Xerxes of their loyalty, the Jewish loyalty, or their skill of craftsmanship that created his wealth. He doesn't tell how they are loyal subjects. He doesn't remind them of what Mordecai has done to save his own skin. He misrepresents the truth about these people. He twists information to get his way. So what does he do? he tells Xerxes, these people keep to themselves. They follow different laws than we do. All truth, okay? All truth, but cast in a way to distort reality. And he plays into Xerxes' weakness, which all abusers do. Xerxes is Haman's match. Maybe that's why Xerxes appointed him in the first place. So, how can you tell? Back to you. How can you tell if you suffer from the illness of pride? Any ideas? Ask yourself this. Where am I bitter or angry about what people have done to me? Okay? You can't stay angry at someone unless you feel superior to them. Bitterness only resides in the heart of pride. Whenever you say, I would never do anything like that, pride is at the root. If your life is distorted by anger, pride is at the root of it. Or what about fear? Are you paralyzed by worry? Do you think you know what is best or know exactly how things need to go? And if it doesn't happen, you're freaking out about it? That takes arrogance. Do you think you know better than others how something ought to be done? That's pride. Do you think you know the truth and others are deceived? Pride lies in it. Maybe more personal question, especially in our political culture. What classes of people do you hate?
Mercy.
How do you treat people different than yourself? All of the social issues, racism, injustice, imperialism, national pride, racial pride, grow out of this one disease. It is foundational to our culture. Pride is a sin that hides itself. It's like carbon monoxide. You lose the ability to tell it's happening, bringing on a slow, insidious death. The more prideful you are, the less pride you think you have. Pride hides itself. You know when you're committing adultery. You aren't saying to the woman or the man, you're my spouse, you're my wife, you're my husband. You don't say when you're embezzling, oh, how did that $100,000 arrive in my check? You know what you are doing. C.S. Lewis, you guys got to read Mere Christianity on the chapter on pride. It's fabulous. But it says, if you think you're not conceited, you're conceited. Let's get real. Can you tell yourself the truth? Be honest with yourself. Have you been thinking about a couple of other people during this presentation? It takes a certain level of pride to be mainly thinking about someone else. The deadliest form of pride is a religious one. I often hear people say, well, the way to solve the problem is to give your heart to God. They just have to be converted. That is a sociological, a psychological solution, answer to that issue. But religiosity would only, may kill off lust a little bit. Okay? Religiosity will kill off materialism to a great degree, especially if you're paying tithe and offering. But religiosity makes pride worse.
All right.
There's no pride worse than religious pride.
All right.
There's no pride greater than the pride of the Pharisees. God is great, and you need to obey Him is not the answer. It doesn't decrease pride at all. In fact, saying that statement is an act of pride. Jonathan Edwards, in his great sermon on humility, says, it's like pouring oil on a fire to try to deal with pride that way. Back to our story. Haman doesn't want to just kill or mortify Mordecai. He is intent on humiliating him before the whole realm. It's a 75-foot pole. How tall is that? This is what, maybe 30, 40 feet at most? Maybe 40, almost twice as tall as this is this pole. And, most translations of the Bible say that it is translated as gallows. But the original language said it's an impalling pole. It's a pointed pole. It is the most horrible, grueling death that the human heart can conceive. That Mordecai is intent on doing. It's the worst violence. That's how intense is Haman's rage against this man for not paying him respect. It's horrifying. Does it bring knots to your stomach to even think about it? This is so like Satan. But God had other ideas.
All right.
God had other ideas. The king can't sleep. He's restless. And his court officials read to him. And he discovers Mordecai's courage. And he's so grateful. He wants to do something to express his appreciation.
Yeah.
So in comes Haman, so desperately needing respect himself, desperately wanting approval, desperately wanting honor and glory. And I love this statement in the Bible. Who else? Who else but the king of Consortium? But me. But me. And so he comes up with the most outrageous, extravagant parade he can possibly think of. And all these symbols that he uses here are incredibly important in the culture. Because putting on the king's robe means that he has part of his authority as king. Being on the king's horse means he's been part of the victory of King Xerxes.
Yes.
And then to have the highest official parading him, it is just like the king is giving this man the greatest honor and expression of gratitude that he possibly can give. It's like as if if everybody saw how much the king loved him, that maybe he would then have a sense of that. We don't just want love. We want someone who we think the world of to think the world of us. The praise of the praiseworthy is above all words. I don't know who said that. That's what Haman feels would fill him up. But to his absolute shock, the king does this profound reversal. The king says, you take the role of the servant. You do everything you have said to honor my friend Mordecai. Mordecai is about to be trampled in the dust, literally that very day. And he is up on the pinnacle. The Mordecai is up on the pinnacle, and Haman is in the dust. Because he tried to put himself up there, he has been doomed. This is what the Bible says everywhere. This is part of life. If you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. If you humble yourself, you will be exalted. Lose yourself, define it. It matters in social life. It matters in the arts. Everywhere. When you try to put yourself on top, you'll end up on the bottom. Lose your life and you will save it. Look for yourself and you will only find rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ and you will find him everywhere you may go. Why is this the principle of the universe? If you humble yourself, you'll be exalted. Why is this the principle? I believe it is the principle because that's who God is. He humbled himself to the lowest possible place. It's the nature of God. It's how God operates. It's the foundation of his kingdom. What if in that moment Haman had realized that Xerxes was giving him the highest honor by serving Mordecai? What would have happened? What if Haman realized that the fact that he's trusting him with Mordecai, that's the highest honor he could possibly give him? How would that have changed his life? Haman didn't ask for the wrong thing. Okay? What he asked for, all of us want. We want someone of ultimate glory to love us. Not love in general. What we need is the ultimate assurance of our worth. We need someone we think the world of to love us. We need the praise of the praiseworthy. He didn't ask for the wrong thing. We're all asking the same question. That's why we all have this problem with God. That's why we're all so needy. He just asked the wrong king. There's a better king who, believe it or not, stripped himself of his glory. When he went to the cross, he was not only stripped of his clothes, literally, he was stripped of his Father's love, stripped of his Father's approval, of his Father's respect. Why? He was reversing places with us. And beyond that, he did this voluntarily.
Yes. Amen.
He is the ultimate king because he reverses places.
Yes. Amen.
God made him who knew no sin, that we might become the righteousness of God. Jesus Christ was stripped naked so we could receive the righteous robe of his Son. Jesus takes what we deserve so that we can get what he deserves. I love his prayer in John 17, where he prays to the Father, give them the glory that you gave me from the foundation of the world. He says, give them the delight, give them the affirmation, give them the honor that you gave me. Wow. When you realize that the ultimate King has given you everything, that is what makes the soul at rest and fills the void of your self-absorption. To know He died for you, that He humbled Himself for you, and He did that willingly, is such a gift. It just strips us of all this internal self-absorption. He was so strong that He didn't care what people thought. He was so strong, He was strong enough to be weak. He was so strong that He would do the right thing no matter what.
Yeah.
If you see Him doing that for you, you will be strong enough to learn from your mistakes. You will be humble enough to realize you don't know it all. You're not the authority on truth. You will not seek attention from less worthy kings. My grandfather came to live with me when he was 97 years old. He lived to one day before his 99th birthday. And every day we would enjoy our meals together, and Grandpa would tell me stories. I know stories about my grandfather that not another person in the family knows, except if I'm sure. I wish I had a tape recorder. So one day he told me how he had marginalized his daughter and how his heart was breaking for the violations that had been done to her. How the elders had counseled him to put her away, and how Grandma had refused to allow him to embrace her. And he sat at the dinner table and wept. His heart had been broken by his suffering, and he grieved deeply his sin against her. His righteous pride was over. How could this be? Because suffering had broken his heart, and because he came to understand the grace and mercy of the divine exchange. Every morning I would waken to him singing the song, I need thee, precious Jesus, for I am very lonely, a stranger and a pilgrim. I have no earthly stay. Friends, if we believe the mark of the beast is about Sabbath keeping, think again. The mark of the beast is about whose kingdom you are operating under. A system of abuse built on the kingdom of darkness, or a system of humility created in the kingdom of God. Let's get rid of all of our righteous arrogance that distorts reality and leads to spiritual, physical, emotional violence of every kind. What principles are you going to allow to govern your life? Let's pray. It is astonishing, Father, what you have done, that you are willing. I mean, it's just amazing that you were willing to descend from the highest position in the universe to the lowest for us. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving us what you deserve. Teach us how to live the glory